Hi, my name is Isabelle. That evening, the warm golden lights spilled across every table inside a high-end restaurant on the outskirts of Boston, the place I had booked weeks in advance to celebrate the most important milestone of my life, my master's graduation in finance from Columbia University. At 27, I thought I had come a long way, surviving countless sleepless nights and the endless juggling between work and study, only to finally wear the graduation gown I had dreamed of for years. Yet, even on the night that was supposed to belong to me, I felt like an outsider. Every glance, every word of praise at the table was not directed at me but instead at Vanessa, my sister, the so-called perfect daughter in my parents' eyes. They marveled at her expensive dress, at the glossy photos she had just posted on social media, as if this dinner had been arranged to honor her rather than the years of hard work I had put in. I sat quietly, forcing a polite smile, telling myself I had long been used to it, but the bitterness still rose and lodged heavy in my chest. When dessert arrived, the spark that ignited everything happened. Ethan, Vanessa's 10-year-old son, suddenly dashed around the table and stopped right behind me. In front of everyone, he snatched the purse I had left on my chair and tossed it straight into the swimming pool nearby. His voice rang out, gleeful and cruel. "Mom says you don't deserve nice things." In an instant, the table erupted with laughter. Vanessa laughed until tears rolled down her face, while my parents nearly doubled over, wiping their eyes as they praised him. Kids are just so honest and adorable. Not one person defended me. Not a single apology was spoken. I sat there, feeling their laughter slice through my ears like tiny blades, but I kept my smile frozen in place. Then I stood up, silent, without protest, scanning the room one last time before lowering my gaze. Deep down, I knew this was more than just a ruined dinner. It was the final punctuation mark on all my futile efforts to belong to a family that had never truly seen me as one of their own. Have you ever experienced the feeling of being turned into a joke by your own family on a day that was supposed to be yours? And where are you watching this story from, and at what time? Tell me your story in the comments so I know I am not alone in this moment. My childhood was never truly mine. From the moment I was old enough to understand, I felt Vanessa's shadow stretching over my life. She is 3 years older, always the center of every party, every conversation at home, every proud glance from our parents. When Vanessa turned 16, the whole neighborhood buzzed about the bright red car our parents bought her. I still remember that evening clearly. Neighbors came over to take pictures, friends rushed in cheering, and I stood quietly on the porch holding a book, forcing a smile. The car was covered with a white cloth, our parents counted down and pulled it away, the house erupted in applause, and I heard someone whisper, "Vanessa is truly the pride of the hearts." No one asked what I was thinking, no one cared that I had just won first place in the school speech contest that day. In their eyes, my academic achievements meant nothing compared to the radiant image of my sister beside her new car. That year, Vanessa's birthday was an extravagant backyard party with strings of lights across the trees, a live band, and more than 50 guests. I wore an old dress my mother told me to make do with because it was still fine, and I stood handing out pastries to her friends. When my birthday came around, it was reduced to a simple family dinner and a hastily written greeting card. My mother said, "You've never liked big fusses, so this is more appropriate." I didn't argue, I nodded and told myself I didn't need much. But deep inside, I longed to be seen, to have a party where my name was spoken, to be the main character just once. That longing slowly turned into a persistent, smoldering emptiness that lasted throughout my childhood. In high school, I studied day and night, always at the top of my class, earning full scholarships for summer programs. Each time a letter of achievement arrived, I handed it to my parents with excitement, hoping to see their faces light up with pride. But their usual response was only, "Well done, Isabelle, but you'll need to take care of yourself. Vanessa is different, she has leadership qualities, you should learn from her." I still remember the first time I received a full scholarship for college, an achievement that had not come easily. I came home, hands trembling as I opened the envelope in front of the whole family. At that moment, Vanessa was busy showing off her new photo online, racking up hundreds of likes. My parents barely glanced at my scholarship letter before turning their attention to comment on Vanessa's modern sense of style. I forced a smile, hiding my disappointment, but deep down I knew the truth. I was nothing more than a quiet shadow standing behind the stage, illuminating the main character, Vanessa. The older I grew, the clearer the distance became. When I was accepted into Columbia with a prestigious scholarship, my mother only said, "If you're so capable, then handle it yourself. You've always been financially independent." But when Vanessa dropped out of college, my parents immediately funded a fashion boutique for her right in the center of Boston. They bragged to their friends, "Our eldest daughter is starting her own business. She has true entrepreneurial spirit." No one mentioned that I was working nights in the library and tutoring on weekends to cover living expenses, even with the scholarship. In this family, Vanessa was the pride, while I was simply the one who managed on her own, a flattering phrase that barely concealed their neglect. The breaking point came the year Vanessa wanted to buy a luxury SUV. She didn't qualify for credit because of her mounting debts, and Mark was unemployed. I knew all of that, and I also knew I should have said no. But one evening, my father sat across from me, his voice low and heavy with pressure. "Isabelle, you're good with finances, your credit is strong. Just co-sign, it'll only take a few months. This is for the family, nothing serious." I froze. In that moment, memories of every time I had been belittled, compared, and overlooked flooded back. But my father's unwavering stare, paired with my mother's nod as if this were the most natural expectation in the world, made me relent. I signed the papers, my heart sinking. Vanessa leapt with joy, hugging our parents tightly, while I sat there forcing a stiff smile, feeling as if I had just tightened another chain around my own neck. I didn't want to argue, didn't want to be branded selfish, so I chose silence, just as I always had. From that moment on, I understood I was not only dismissed but also exploited. My academic achievements had never been enough to make them proud, yet my spotless credit record was more than enough for them to depend on whenever they needed a loan. I wasn't the child they loved, I was simply a convenient tool. And slowly, the fragile hope I had carried for a warm home crumbled, leaving me with only one undeniable truth. I had always lived in a family where fairness never truly existed. I drove away from the restaurant into the night, heading back to my small apartment with a lingering ache in my chest. Boston's streets were quiet at that hour, the streetlights stretching into mottled streaks across the pavement. In the rearview mirror, my face looked pale, my eyes rimmed red after an evening that should have been joyful but had turned into a humiliating memory. I parked in front of the old brick building and climbed the familiar narrow stairs to my little second-floor apartment. When the door closed behind me, a heavy silence settled in, a stark contrast to the loud, mocking laughter that still echoed in my head. I dropped my bag onto the worn sofa and sank down as if my body had no strength left. The faces from the dinner table kept replaying in my mind. Vanessa's triumphant smirk, my parents clutching their stomachs laughing until tears came, the others nodding along and joining in. No one paused to consider that I was being humiliated, no one stood up for me. The whole dinner, where I had hoped to hear congratulations, had become a stage for publicly ridiculing me. For years I had grown accustomed to being belittled, but this time, beneath the pool's cold, shimmering light and the reverberating laughter, I no longer felt sadness. I only saw one undeniable truth. I had never belonged to this family, and I never would. I let my eyes wander around my tiny apartment. Everything was simple and worn, yet each item had been bought with money I had earned myself. The wooden table with its scratches, the bookshelf crammed full of papers, the old yellow desk lamp, all of it stood as proof of the independent life I had struggled to build piece by piece. Unlike Vanessa's spacious house not far from here, filled with luxury items, my apartment wasn't glamorous, but at least it was mine. And in that very moment, I knew I had to do something decisive to cut the final chain that bound me to them. I opened my laptop, my hands trembling slightly as the keyboard lit up in the darkness. The bank's website appeared, so familiar I could navigate it by heart. For years I had quietly logged in to check on the loan I had co-signed for Vanessa. Each time I did, my heart clenched at the sight of a debt that wasn't mine, yet I stayed silent, swallowed my tears, and told myself it was the price of keeping peace in the family. But tonight, I no longer wanted silence. I moved the cursor to the section titled Loan Guarantor. There, the words appeared. The guarantor has the right to request removal from the contract under certain conditions. I drew in a deep breath, and in my mind, I heard my father's voice. You studied finance, your credit is strong, help your sister. Then my mother's. You're tough, you don't need much. And Vanessa's mocking tone. All you've got are books. The things that really matter are mine. For years I had let those words shackle me. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to be removed as guarantor from this contract? This action cannot be undone. I sat motionless in front of the screen, my heart pounding. In my mind, images flashed in sequence, me at 16 watching Vanessa receive the car, me at 22 trembling as I signed the loan papers, and me tonight watching my purse thrown into the pool. All of it led to this moment. I pressed enter. On the screen, the status changed. My name vanished from the guarantor list. One click, but it felt as if I had just ripped apart a chain that had bound me for years. I sat there stunned, then began to cry. Not tears of fear or despair, but of relief. Tears fell onto the keyboard while I laughed through sobs. I had done something I had never dared to imagine before. I had chosen myself over my family. The little apartment suddenly felt different. It remained simple and modest, still lacking in many comforts, but it was filled with a sense of freedom. For the first time, I felt truly in control of my life. No longer bearing someone else's debt, no longer dreading every account check. I leaned back on the sofa, stared at the worn ceiling, and whispered to myself, from now on, I am free. The next morning, I sat by the window as the first sunlight filtered through the old curtains. I hadn't slept all night, yet my body buzzed with a strange energy. Deep down, I knew my decision the night before would have consequences. And they arrived sooner than I had expected. At 7:30 a.m., my phone buzzed nonstop with a flood of notifications. In the neighborhood group chat, people were buzzing with gossip. A pearl white luxury SUV had just been repossessed from Vanessa's driveway by the finance company. Within minutes, photos appeared, shots of the car being hooked up to a tow crane, the tires screeching against the cement, while neighbors stood at a distance, secretly recording with their phones. Someone commented, "Can't believe the Hearts let this happen. That car wasn't even paid off yet, and already got taken." As I looked at those images, what I felt wasn't satisfaction, but a cold certainty. The illusion of safety that had always surrounded them had finally shattered. At exactly 8:05, a furious pounding rattled my door, each knock so forceful it felt like someone wanted to break it down. I walked over, my heart oddly calm. When I opened the door, there was Vanessa. Her face was pale, the usually perfect golden waves of her hair now a tangled mess, her makeup smeared after what must have been a night of tears and rage. In her hands, she clutched the crumpled loan papers, shaking so hard the pages were nearly torn. "Where's my car, Isabelle?" she yelled, her voice shrill and echoing down the hallway. "What do you think you're doing? Are you destroying this whole family over a childish prank?" I didn't answer. I stood motionless in the doorway, one hand resting lightly on the wooden frame, neither inviting her in nor stepping outside. That small space suddenly became an invisible boundary. On one side, the old me who had endured and stayed silent for years. On the other, the person I was now, the one who had just cut the final tether. Vanessa kept shouting, tears streaking down her face. "Ethan is just a child. He said something stupid, so why are you being so heartless? Are you even my sister anymore? Do you even understand what family means?" Her words poured out accusation, pleading, fury, but beneath them I heard another tone. Fear. Vanessa knew that the repossession was only the beginning. Without me on the loan, all the luxuries she wrapped around herself would start to crumble. And she knew, this time, I would not come back to rescue her. She thrust the crumpled loan papers forward, shaking as if she wanted to force them into my hands. You signed these. You have a responsibility. You can't just remove yourself like this. You're embarrassing us in front of the neighbors, driving him crazy. Do you want to watch this family fall apart and be satisfied? I looked at her with calm eyes. I remembered all the nights I collapsed over my desk, worried about loan deadlines, all the times I heard my parents say, "Vanessa needs the help, you'll be fine." Those memories only made me stronger. I still didn't say a word. My silence now was the clearest answer I could give. Vanessa seemed to spiral further into panic. She sobbed, her voice breaking. "What do you even get out of this? To prove you're stronger than me? You're only tearing everything apart." But this time, her tears had no effect. I was no longer the timid younger sister afraid of upsetting her. I saw it clearly. The balance of power had shifted. I shook my head gently, then slowly closed the door. Not with anger, not with a slam, but with the quiet finality of ending an old chapter. Her pounding continued on the other side, mixed with sobs and curses, but I had already turned away and stepped back inside. I sat down in my chair, my heartbeat slow and steady. What I felt wasn't triumph, but a strange, profound stillness. For the first time, I understood freedom as something more than a word: freedom from being held hostage, freedom from guilt for choosing myself. Out there, Vanessa could scream, my parents could rage, the neighbors could gossip. But behind this door, I knew. I had stepped out of the invisible cage, and even though this was only the beginning, I was ready. I thought that after the chaos of the morning when the SUV was towed away, things would quiet down. But I was wrong. In just the days that followed, my phone turned into a battlefield. In the morning, my father called, his voice sharp as steel. "Isabelle, you need to fix this mistake right now. Do you realize you've humiliated this family in front of the neighbors? What do you want people to think of us?" By noon, my mother's voice came through, trembling. "Sweetheart, I know you're angry. But Ethan is just a child. You can't ruin everything over this. Family is still family, please don't push things further." By evening, Vanessa was screaming into the phone. "Are you happy now, seeing me walk in the rain? You've embarrassed me, you've made my child a target of jokes. You're cruel, Isabelle." The calls came like crashing waves, threats followed by pleading, fury followed by sobs. I let the phone buzz, unanswered. At first, my heart still trembled, my finger hovering over the answer button before pulling back. But gradually, my silence became its own weapon. The more they shouted, the more I realized the power had shifted into my hands. I had the right to choose not to step back into that toxic cycle ever again. But it didn't stop with the phone calls. One evening, when I opened TikTok, I froze at the sight of a video Ethan had shared that was spreading among his friends. In the clip, he laughed gleefully as he threw my purse into the pool and shouted, "Mom says you don't deserve nice things." Then the camera panned to the dinner table where my parents and Vanessa clapped and roared with laughter. Ethan had added mocking background music and a caption across the screen, "Auntie Isabelle equals invisible wallet." The video was only a few seconds long, but it was enough to twist my heart. Looking at Vanessa's 10-year-old son, I saw clearly that his arrogance wasn't something he was born with, it was the result of what my family had planted in him. In the days that followed, I walked the streets with the constant feeling that everyone knew. I couldn't be sure who outside the family had watched the video, but the shame seemed to seep into every breath I took. I slipped quietly into the library, quietly back home, trying to ignore the mocking messages sent to my inbox from anonymous accounts. Then one night, returning from my part-time job, I found my small car parked in front of the building had been scratched deeply along the side. Long, sharp gouges carved into the paint like a warning. The shock hadn't even settled when I noticed the passenger window shattered, shards of glass scattered across the seat. I stood frozen, the night air rushing through the broken pane and raising goosebumps across my skin. This was no longer a prank. This was deliberate destruction. I rushed upstairs to my apartment and pulled up the building's security system that the landlord had installed. My heart pounded as I rewound the footage from that evening. And then, the images appeared in stark clarity. Ethan, alongside another boy his age, clutching stones and hurling them directly at my car. They laughed as they filmed themselves, pointing, grinning, and high-fiving like they had just accomplished some great victory. Watching it, a chill ran through me. This was the same child whose birthdays I had bought presents for, the same boy I had once taken to the park, and now he had become a fearless vandal who thought destruction was entertainment. I sank into a chair, my eyes glued to the screen. A flood of questions hammered in my head. How could a 10-year-old act like this? Why hadn't the adults taught him right from wrong? Why had they encouraged him instead? And then the answer struck me with painful clarity, because my family had turned me into a joke, turning my humiliation into their shared amusement. Ethan was nothing more than a reflection of what the adults had sown. The anger inside me was no longer a quiet ember. It erupted, sharp and undeniable. I knew that if I kept staying silent, it wouldn't end here. Today it was scratches on my car and a shattered window. Tomorrow it could be my apartment. Tomorrow it could be me. I couldn't wait for that moment to finally fight back. I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. Outside the window, the city still blazed with lights, the traffic flowing like an endless river. Inside my small apartment, I whispered to myself, enough. I will not stay silent one more time. I sat in the dark with my phone in hand, my thumb trembling slightly as it hovered over the name Maya. For years she had been the only person who witnessed me struggle in silence. Maya was not only a close college friend but also a young, courageous lawyer who had chosen to defend justice even when it meant confronting falsehoods. I inhaled deeply and pressed call. Isabelle? Are you calling at this hour? Maya's familiar steady voice came through. I could not hold back and told her everything from the beginning to the end. The humiliating evening at my graduation dinner, my purse thrown into the pool, the barrage of phone calls, the mocking TikTok video. Then my car scratched and the window shattered. When I described Ethan and his friend laughing in the security footage, my voice broke. Maya, I don't know what to do. They're my family. But if I stay silent, I'm afraid next time it won't be just the car. On the other end there was a few seconds of silence, then she spoke slowly but firmly. Isabelle, if you let this go, they'll think you have no worth. They'll disrespect you even more, and these actions will only keep happening and escalate. This is no longer a family matter, it's criminal behavior. I went still. Her words awakened something in me. For years, I had hidden behind the excuse of keeping the peace, convincing myself that silence would protect me. But the truth was the opposite. My silence had made me the target. Maya continued, tomorrow we'll go to the police station together. Bring all the evidence, the TikTok video, the security footage, and the threatening messages. You're not alone in this. The next morning, Maya stood outside my apartment. She wore a simple black suit, a folder tucked firmly under her arm. When she saw me, she didn't waste time with small talk, she just placed her hand on my shoulder, her eyes steady. Let's go. And they're wet. We arrived at the district police headquarters. The room was cold and bright, with gray walls and the lingering scent of stale coffee, and my heart pounded harder with every step. When the duty officer asked why we were there, I hesitated for a moment, but Maya stepped forward without pause. She opened her laptop and showed him the TikTok clip. Ethan tossing my purse into the pool as the table erupted in laughter. The officer's face grew serious. Then Maya played the security footage. Ethan and his friend hurling rocks at my car, the window shattering, their laughter piercing through the recording. This time the officer's neutrality vanished. He nodded firmly. That's enough. This can't be dismissed as childish mischief anymore. I clenched my hands together, trying to steady myself. The officer pulled out a case file, flipped through a few pages, then looked at me. Actually, we've received prior complaints from neighbors about this boy Ethan Hart, throwing things at doors, scratching cars, causing trouble. But there was never any solid evidence. This time is different. Your footage is undeniable. I froze, caught between pain and anger. So this wasn't the first time Ethan had acted like this, But because he was the golden boy in Vanessa's and my parents' eyes, everything had always been covered up. Now the truth stood exposed, impossible to deny. Maya placed my prepared file on the desk. In addition, we're requesting an investigation into the loan signed under Isabelle's name without her consent. But for now, we demand immediate action on the deliberate property damage. The officer nodded, taking detailed notes before handing me a statement form. My hands trembled as I held the pen, but with every signature I wrote, I felt myself growing steadier. I recounted everything, from the dinner humiliation to the night I found my car vandalized. When I finished and signed, I lifted my head and looked the officer straight in the eye. "I don't want to stay silent anymore." He nodded back. "You've done the right thing. We'll move forward." With this evidence, Ethan will be placed in a juvenile rehabilitation program, at the very least to understand that his actions carry consequences. On the way home, I sat quietly beside Maya. Outside the window, the city bustled with life, but inside me a new feeling swelled. I no longer felt fear, no longer felt like I was fighting alone. I had just taken a giant step forward, a step I had never dared to take in all these years. Maya tilted her head toward me with a gentle smile. "See? The moment you spoke up, the balance shifted. No one has the right to trample you anymore." I nodded, my eyes stinging but my chest lighter than it had been in years. That night, back in my apartment, I opened the window and looked out at the quiet street. One thought echoed in my mind. Enough. I will see this through to the end. After our meeting at the police station, I thought I had already reached the bottom of the truth that nothing could be worse than a 10-year-old openly vandalizing property while the entire family cheered him on. But when Maya suggested I gather every financial document related to me to prepare for the next steps, I realized what I had seen was only the tip of an enormous iceberg. That evening, I spread everything across the table. Bank statements, loan contracts, credit notices. Papers I had long avoided opening because each time I did, it felt like a knife tightening in my chest. Maya sat across from me, her laptop open, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "We'll go through every item. If there's something off, we'll find it," she said firmly. From the very first pages, Maya's brow furrowed. She pointed to a consumer loan agreement dated 3 years ago. "Isabelle, do you remember ever signing this? $12,000 for electronic equipment." I shook my head, stunned. No. At that time, I was still in grad school in New York. I wasn't even in Boston. And I had no need for that money. Maya typed quickly, pulling up a comparison between the signature on the contract and my real signature from my driver's license. The differences were so stark that a chill ran down my spine. The writing on the contract was crude, rigid, an obvious attempt to mimic but never truly match mine. Then we continued. Another loan appeared in my name, $8,500, supposedly for home renovations. I remembered the time Vanessa posted on social media that she and her husband had remodeled their kitchen. I had wondered how she could afford it, then let it go. Now the answer was right in front of me. They had used my name. Maya didn't need an expert to conclude, this signature is forged too. Page after page, line after line, the truth unfolded and my stomach twisted. It wasn't just 1 or 2 instances, but a string of loans, personal loans, lines of credit, even credit cards I had never opened. The total ran into tens of thousands of dollars. All of it bore my name, relying on my clean financial record to get approved. And the cruelest part, my parents and Vanessa and her husband had carried this out quietly, without telling me. I sat frozen in my chair, my mind a blank. The sensation of betrayal spread through me like an icy wave. For years I had believed I was only being belittled, left out at parties, pushed to the margins of attention. Now I realized the truth was far harsher. They had turned me into the family's invisible wallet, a clean name to hide their reckless spending and greed. Maya looked up, her eyes carrying both sadness and determination. She let out a heavy sigh, her voice weighted with gravity. "Isabelle, this isn't just a family matter anymore. This is organized fraud. They forged your signature multiple times, over several years. If we take this to court, this evidence will be undeniable. And I pressed my hands against my face as tears streamed down, though they no longer came with the same choking grief as before. What I felt was both pain and relief. Pain because the truth was brutal, relief because it was finally uncovered. I remembered all those years I scraped together every dollar to pay tuition while Vanessa flaunted luxury vacations, my parents showering her with praise for looking radiant. I had blamed myself for not knowing how to enjoy life. But the reality was, they had been enjoying it under my name. I lifted my head and looked at Maya. If I bring this into the light, the family will fall apart. My voice trembled, not from hesitation, but from admitting something that had always been obvious. Maya placed her warm hand over mine. Family? Isabelle, a real family doesn't do this to their daughter. The only thing that will fall apart here is the false image they've built. You deserve a life free from lies and chains. Ah! I took a deep breath and wiped away my tears. Inside me, a strange calm began to rise. For years, I had feared collapse, afraid of losing the few scraps of family ties I had left. But now I understood, holding on to those scraps had only left me bleeding more. I looked Maya straight in the eyes and said clearly, I will take this to court, even if it means this family is completely destroyed. Maya nodded, her gaze bright with conviction. That's the right decision. And you won't be alone. I'll be with you until the end. That night, I gathered all the evidence into one neat file. Staring at those papers felt like staring at a verdict that had been hanging over my head for years, waiting to fall. But now, I wasn't trembling anymore. I was ready to hold it in my hands, bring it into the light, and let justice speak for me. The day of the trial came faster than I had imagined. Within just a few weeks, after the police completed their preliminary investigation and gathered the evidence, my case was officially brought before the district court. It was no longer a private family matter, it had become a real case, widely reported in the local press for its financial fraud, the scale of deception, and the shocking clash between blood relatives. They called it the Hart family case, as if my last name itself had been turned into entertainment for the public. That morning, I arrived at the courthouse with Maya. I wore a simple navy blue dress, with no elaborate makeup. I wanted everyone to see me not as the abandoned daughter anymore, but as a calm woman standing up to defend herself. The entrance was packed with reporters, cameras flashing relentlessly in my direction. I heard someone call out, Isabelle, are you really suing your own family? I gave no reply, only walked straight inside. In the courtroom, the two sides faced each other like opposing armies. Maya and I sat on one side, a thick file of evidence laid out in front of us. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat squeezed between her husband and my parents. She looked more haggard than I had ever seen her, her blonde hair a tangled mess, her makeup streaked from tears. My father's face was rigid, his eyes sharp, as if ready for battle. My mother kept her head bowed, her hands trembling as they clutched a small prayer book. When the judge's gavel struck, the room fell silent. The prosecutor began presenting the evidence. The first piece was the video of Ethan vandalizing my car. All eyes turned to the large screen, where Ethan's face appeared, grinning as he hurled rocks and shattered my window. His childish laughter echoed through the courtroom, but this time no one joined in. Some shook their heads, others whispered in dismay. Vanessa shot up from her seat, sobbing loudly. He's just a child. Every child gets into mischief. How can you put my son on display over a silly prank? The judge had to pound the gavel again, ordering her to sit back down. Next came the TikTok video, the one where Ethan tossed my purse into the pool in the middle of the dinner, while the entire table erupted in laughter. I sat still, gripping the edge of my chair as that laughter replayed once more. But this time, I wasn't trembling. I turned to Vanessa and saw her face twisted in despair. Then the prosecutor moved to the financial records, the most crucial part. Loan agreements, credit cards, all in my name, paired with forensic analysis of the signatures. On the screen, each forged signature was displayed side by side with my real one. An expert witness confirmed the discrepancies beyond doubt. My father shot up from his seat, his voice low and harsh. "This is fabricated. We have nothing to do with this." But the prosecutor immediately revealed bank transfers from those fraudulent loans into my parents' joint account and into Vanessa and her husband's account. The courtroom erupted with uncontrollable murmurs. My mother broke down in sobs, clutching the judge's hand as she pleaded, "We only wanted to help our eldest daughter have a better life. Isabelle has always been strong and independent, but Vanessa needed us. It was out of love, not fraud." Her voice trembled, but no one believed her anymore. I looked at my mother, my heart aching, but the truth was clear. Real love never means turning your daughter into a financial shield. The climax came when the judge allowed me to speak. I stood, walked to the wooden podium, and the courtroom fell utterly silent. I looked around and felt every gaze on me, judgmental, curious, pitying, but this time I did not tremble. My voice rang out, calm but resolute. "I am not suing out of hatred. I am not doing this to get revenge or to humiliate anyone. I am suing to protect my right to exist independently." For years I stayed silent. I let them belittle me, let them use my name as a tool. I kept my teeth clenched, hoping to preserve what they called family. But today I stand here to say, enough. I am no longer a shadow. I want justice to be served, and I want to live a life that belongs to me. When I finished, the room remained mute. I could even hear a pen drop somewhere in the rear. In that moment, I knew that, whatever the outcome, I had reclaimed my voice. In the end, the judge delivered the verdict. Ethan, being under the age of criminal responsibility, was ordered to participate in a 2-year juvenile rehabilitation program under special supervision. Vanessa and her husband were ordered to repay all illegally obtained loans and to pay compensation to me. My parents were penalized for financial fraud and suffered the loss of their communities, standing those who once saw them as a model family now looked at them with contempt. The gavel struck, bringing the trial to a close. I returned to my seat, my legs slightly trembling, but my heart lighter than it had ever been. For the first time in my life, I was no longer a shadow in my own story. I had stood up, calm and steady, to reclaim my freedom. As I left the courthouse, cameras and microphones swarmed around me. I didn't answer a single question. I simply walked straight ahead, head held high. Inside me echoed one truth: from this moment on, my life would no longer be dictated by anyone else. I was Isabelle Hart, and at last, I had stepped out of the shadows. The trial was over, but its aftermath rolled on like relentless waves crashing over the Hart family. Within weeks, the polished facade of the perfect family my parents had spent years constructing lay in ruins. Once, they were admired as the model church couple. The stern father, the gentle mother, 2 daughters so different yet seemingly complementary. But now, when they walked into the local supermarket, they received only whispers, curt nods, or outright avoidance. Neighbors no longer invited them to summer barbecues or Christmas parties. One woman who had once been close to my mother told her bluntly, "I can't believe a mother would do that to her own daughter." Just that one sentence left my mother speechless, and the whisper spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Vanessa, the star in my parents' eyes, also fell from her proud pedestal. The boutique she once flaunted on social media could not survive after her name appeared in the financial fraud verdict. Customers canceled orders en masse, partners severed contracts, and the press ran stories about a female boutique owner exposed. The large suburban house that had been the symbol of her manufactured success was finally put up for sale to cover debts. Photos of Vanessa at lavish champagne parties disappeared, replaced by vague posts online lamenting, "Some people will never understand the sacrifices a family makes." I read them and only managed a faint smile, because she no longer had the power to touch my life. My parents retreated into silence. My father stopped attending community meetings, and my mother was no longer invited to speak at the church women's group. Their forced smiles and boastful displays about grandchildren vanished. They shrank into the large house that suddenly felt too big under the weight of quiet. I did not feel triumphant, but I did not pity them either. They were tasting what I had endured for years: imposed loneliness. As for me, I knew I could not stay in Boston forever. Every street corner reminded me of painful memories. After the trial, I received an official offer from an investment fund in Chicago for a senior financial analyst position. It was the job I had always dreamed of, a chance to prove my true worth without needing anyone's approval. I accepted, and a few weeks later I packed my bags and left the small apartment that had been my home for so many years. Before leaving, I closed every joint account that had ever been exploited and canceled all remaining financial ties to my family. Each click, each signature felt like a declaration. From this moment on, I would no longer be bound to them, no longer let them define my worth. When it was done, I felt as though I had finally removed the last chain. On the day I arrived in Chicago, I carried only a few suitcases of clothes, a box of books, and my laptop, everything that truly belonged to me. The city welcomed me with its vast sky and vibrant energy. I rented a small but modern apartment with large windows opening onto the deep blue of Lake Michigan. When I moved in, I stood for a long time before the glass, watching the lake sparkle under the afternoon sunday. No more nights crying alone in my old Boston apartment, no more angry pounding at my door from Vanessa, no more endless phone calls. Here, there was only peace. On my first night, I spread fresh sheets across the bed, stacked my books neatly on the shelf, and lit a sandalwood candle. I sat by the wide window of my new home, Lake Michigan glowing with the colors of sunset before me, its waves shimmering with purple and gold like strokes of a painting. In my hands was a steaming cup of tea, the fragrance of sandalwood filling the room with comfort. For the first time in so long, I allowed myself to sit still, breathe slowly, and look back at everything. The journey I had just lived through felt like a storm, from the night of my graduation when I was humiliated, to the morning after when I saw Vanessa's car being towed away, through the days of threats and insults, and finally to walking into a courtroom to face my entire family. Each moment had cut into me like a knife, but now, looking back, I no longer saw a bleeding wound. I saw them as carvings in wood, rough, ugly, but shaping who I am today. I realized something simple that I had been too afraid to admit for years: family does not always mean love. We are taught that blood is the strongest bond, that no matter who betrays us out there, family is the place we return to. But the truth is different. For me, that house was never a safe haven. It was only the place where I learned silence, where I learned to endure, where I learned to be a shadow beside the golden child they chose to praise. I used to blame myself, thinking I wasn't good enough to be loved. But now I understand. Real love never turns a child into an invisible wallet for the rest of the family to exploit. I also came to see something else. Healing does not always mean reconciliation. I once dreamed that one day my family would change, that a belated apology would make up for everything. But holding on to that hope only dragged me deeper into the cycle of disappointment. Healing, for me, means letting go. It means accepting that some relationships must end so that new ones can begin. It means releasing unrealistic expectations in order to grasp true freedom. If anyone listening to me hears a piece of themselves in this story, I want to say a few words to you. If you have ever been exploited or belittled by the very people who are supposed to protect you, remember that you have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to say no. You have the right to protect your worth, even if that makes others uncomfortable. And you have the right to step out of that toxic loop, because freedom only comes when you dare to choose yourself instead of continuing to endure. I know that decision is not easy. Walking away from family is not like closing a door on a room, it is cutting away part of your memories, part of your childhood. There will be nights of loneliness, moments when you look at other families and wonder, I wish I had that too. But I want you to know that you do not need a family to prove your value. You only need an intact self, free and no longer forced to be someone else's shadow. I used to be so afraid that I lost sleep for many nights just thinking about cutting ties. I worried that without them, I would have nothing. But now, sitting in this new apartment with Lake Michigan spread out before me, I understand that I have not lost anything, I have found everything. I have the job I dreamed of, friends who truly value me, and most importantly, I have myself. I won't deny that there are still scars. When I hear someone mention family, there is still a sharp pang inside me. But scars don't mean endless pain. They are proof that I survived, that I stood back up after everything. And now, instead of bowing my head in shame, I hold it high with confidence. I chose my own path. If you are listening to me, I hope you find that same courage. Don't stay silent when you are disrespected. Don't wait for a miracle from those who never truly valued you. Be brave enough to speak, brave enough to walk away, brave enough to build a life that belongs only to you. Because in the end, that freedom will be the greatest gift you could ever give yourself. I set my cup of tea down, stood, and walked to the wide glass window. The city of Chicago glowed before me. Lake Michigan lying calm and still beneath the reflection of stars. I smiled softly, whispering as if declaring it to myself and to anyone listening. I am no longer the family's silent wallet. I am Isabelle Hart, and for the first time, I am free.